I'd like to continue our discussion of the Buddhist and the Christian perspective in terms of looking at life and what it means to experience joy and happiness in life. One of the things that we can look at is how we respond to suffering. Uh, we think of course, the concepts of joy and happiness, and everything is wonderful and good, but then there's also the reality of human suffering. And how do we cope with that reality? How do we deal with human suffering? And how does our dealing with human suffering, how does that affect our pursuit of joy or pursuit of happiness in life? One of the examples that we can think, and we can look at it from both a Buddhist and a Christian perspective, certainly, is September 11th in 2001, that horrific day, similar to what we've experienced recently in 2023 in terms of October 7th for our brothers and sisters in Israel and the attack that was so savage and brutal and killed so many people there. These types of attacks where those who are innocent, those who are not involved in a war, are targeted really in a criminal way and really very horrific acts. How do we deal with them? How do we deal with them in terms of the suffering that they cause? And when you think about it from a perspective of a Buddhist or a Christian, one of the elements that we try to speak about is compassion. And you might say, well, how does compassion uh, relate to these horrific incidents that happen? Well, first of all, I think we're moved to show compassion for those who have been targeted, those who were just going to work on September 11th with no idea that there was going to be any harm done to them. Those who were police and fire persons who were responding to a fire, responding to tragedy, trying to save people, rescue people, help people. We have compassion for them, for their families, all of their relatives, uh, all who knew them, the loss and then the consequent suffering in terms of illnesses that have happened after 9/11 due to the inhalation of some of the smoke from the remains. But also, and this is where it becomes difficult for us, how do we limit our compassion? If we're showing compassion for the victims, we're also able to show compassion for those who flew the planes into the towers, compassion for those who perpetrate violence against others. Where does our compassion end? And certainly, we have to speak of accountability, and we punish those who commit horrific acts. They definitely are accountable for their actions, and they must be held to the consequence of those actions. But what about our compassion? How much compassion should we show? When does our compassion end for people? And there are all sorts of circumstances where people get caught up into horrific things. And so we are challenged when we think of human suffering, challenged to be people of compassion. Theodore Parker, the abolitionist minister, has the famous quote, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And that was a quote that was many times used by Martin Luther King Jr. And what Parker is saying there is that this is a difficult battle, this battle towards justice. It does take a long time. It is not simple. And so our struggle to be people of compassion is a challenge for all of us. It's difficult to have compassion, particularly for our enemies, for those who hurt us, for those who do violence. Very difficult to have any sort of compassion for them at all. And so it is a challenge for us to see them also as sons and daughters of God, misplaced in their actions, certainly, uh, and certainly accountable and in need of uh, justice for them as well. But what about compassion? The Buddhist look at this. We see from the Dalai Lama. He talks about the violence in Lhasa and other cities. And that violence led to a crackdown, led to death, and to the imprisonment of many Tibetans who participated in the protests. And so these were Buddhist men and women who were protesting against injustice. And so how do you achieve a sense of compassion when you are protesting against an injustice? You're full of anger, sometimes even hatred at the person who is oppressing you. So the practice that is recommended from the Buddhist perspective is a practice called Tonglen, which is a meditation practice. It is a way to kind of calm ourselves down and center ourselves, particularly in the face of an adversity, in the face of something that is difficult for us to deal with. When we're feeling this hatred, this anger, as on 9/11. And this meditation practice is involved in both a giving and a taking, this Tonglen. It's a taking on of the fear, the anger, the suspicion. And it's a giving of love and forgiveness. So when you feel those feelings, which are definitely appropriate feelings, natural feelings, feelings we all have, of anger and hatred, you kind of, through Tonglen, you take them on, but then you give them back. You give them back when you love and when you forgive. So this practice of Tonglen is a purifying practice that helps us deal with suffering, that helps us deal with very difficult moments in our life, in the lives of others, and offers in those difficult moments a love and a forgiveness as we take on those negative feelings, the anger and the hatred, and give back love and forgiveness. Certainly not easy, a challenge for all of us, but a challenge that we can meet through our meditation.